All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahashum, Yahweh Shai Bahashum, Rachah Kodash. I want to give double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. In grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. This is your fellow servant, Ruchaya from the GMS Orlando camp, coming at you with another impromptu lesson. And as you can tell from the title of this lesson, there won't be a new generation of farmers. All right, just for the simple fact that we're living through the middle to late stages of an engineered collapse of the farming industry. All right, which is actively transferring that agricultural power to the hands of the elites and these big corporations. All right, which through the spirit, we can see the elites using this newfound agricultural power alongside their domestic and foreign military forces to lay siege upon the people, all right, and to engineer famine, which, I see being tied into the mark of the beast. Because with famine comes desperation, all right? And from desperation, Esau's going to come with his solution, all right? Which is going to be the RFID microchip, all right, spoken about in Revelation 13 and 16, okay? The mark of the beast, But right now, we're living through an engineered collapse of the farming industry, all right? Which I want to get into a little bit of this interview from Sean Ryan and Zach Lawn, which this guy, Zach Lawn, is a farmer from Iowa, all right, which is currently running for the governor of Iowa. Excuse me. My voice is a little hoarse. But he's currently running for the governor of Iowa. And, he's trying to expose all of the, all of the wickedness that Esau is doing. His own brethren, really. He's trying to expose all of the wickedness that his brethren are doing that is actively taking away his inheritance, a part of their inheritance, which we're just going to play a couple of minutes of it. And now we're going to grab a couple of precepts. Lord, when this is edifying unto you elect, all right? But the scriptures speak about this, The scriptures speak about this. And brothers bring it out almost every week. But this is Jeremiah 28 and verse 8. It says, the prophets that have been before me and before thee of old prophesied against many countries and against great kingdoms of war and of evil and of pestilence. All right. And right now we're in the midst of some very evil times. All right. Some very evil times to where not only has Esau set his eyes on capturing, you Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians, in his databases, but he's also set his eyes on capturing his own kind, into these databases and eliminating anybody who doesn't, align with their new order, their newfound ideals, for the people, for the world, which, is going into everybody being chipped. But we're living in some very evil times, man. And these evils are only going to continue to grow, as the time passes. And right now, like I said in the beginning, we're living in the middle to late stages of this collapse, that's being engineered from the elites. Because with the collapse, in their mind is going to come the possibility to rise bigger and better, like a phoenix out of the ashes, and, as the saying in this world goes. But the elites believe that through this collapse that they're engineering, they'll be able to create a new world wherein they will be the gods that govern the earth. All right, as we see spoken about in 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter, which, I've been getting into a lot lately. All right, but it's the spirit because it goes into the enterprise and the mindset of the elites of Esau, Edom, in these latter days. All right, what they're trying to accomplish by these different devices that they're setting forth in the planet. But let's get into a couple of minutes of this interview, and then I'll grab some precepts.
Proceed. Deere has denied any wrongdoing. What do you say to the next generation of farmers watching their parents work 16-hour days to buy farm equipment and they still feel like they don't control what they actually own? Are you dealing?
And I just want to, quick pause, but this is also going into Deuteronomy 30 and 7. All right, where the Lord said that he will, let's get it. We're in the time of prophecy, man. It's Deuteronomy 30:7. And the Lord thy power will put all these curses upon thine enemies and upon them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. All right. And one of the curses, was, I'm at the Deuteronomy 28. Let's see. Let me search it. Right. Deuteronomy 28:17. It says, cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body and the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kind and the flocks of thy sheep. Cursed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shalt thou be when thou goest out. All right. And this is exactly what's taking place, befalling the so-called white man, the average Joe Smo, especially the farmer. All right. Their increase is being cursed and the fruit of their land. All right, and their basket is no longer yielding fruit, going into their stores. All right, their storehouses, their means of making money. All right, it's no longer yielding any fruit. All right, it's all being dismantled, ultimately through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai. All right, but the Lord is using their own kind, their own elites, all right, to destroy the very blessing, that they once partook in, in the golden days.
Farmers watching their parents work 16-hour days to buy farm equipment, and they still feel like they don't control what they actually own. Are you dealing with this on your farm?
We don't use, well, I use more legacy equipment, older equipment, partially for this exact reason. But what I'd say to producers, especially young ones, is I think what they need to understand is this is being done on purpose. They're doing this on purpose. And what I mean by that is that, my whole life, every politician I've ever met has said, we have to support farmers, we have to support farmers. And everything's gotten worse for the actual producer. And so if you actually look at the past 10 years, and what the agribusiness lobby has spent in Washington, D.C., it's about $1.5 billion in the past 10 years lobbying Congress. The top 5 companies during that same time have made about $150 billion in profit. In the same time, we've lost 100,000 farms.
100,000 farms?
Family farms. So who are they lobbying for? It's not the farmer. Yeah. It's not the producer. This is something that sometimes is difficult to bring up because, right now Bobby Kennedy is really fighting against like big food, for instance. And I've been told by people that taking on the fight that I'm taking on with big agriculture is much more difficult. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is big agriculture has created a caricature out of farming. And they're pretending to be the people that are defending the heritage of our farmers. But actually, they're the ones extracting every dollar of wealth out of our farms that they possibly can and bragging about farm consolidation. It's like,
what is farm consolidation? Is that buying a bunch of family farms and putting them together at some big conglomerate?
Yeah, it's that, the producers, the farms are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so what that actually means, and we've done the opposite on my farm, and I'd love to talk to you about that, but what that actually means is every time one of these farms goes away or disappears, there's life that we lose in our rural communities. And our rural communities in Iowa, in the Midwest, they're on life support. But these companies want to work with bigger and bigger.
America itself is on life support, baby. You hear it, though. You hear it from the horse's mouth. The community is on life support. All right, but let's continue.
Producers, and we know that. We know why they want to do that. It's easier. They have less cost when they're dealing with less customers. They can control people easier. And so the statistics that you're talking about young farmers, The World Economic Forum talked about that. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. This is a part of it. 25% of Iowa's farmland.
And, I remember doing videos, on that exact same statement. That was made at the WEF conference a couple of years ago. And a woman said it alongside Klaus Schwab. You will own nothing and be happy. And right now, once again, what's happening with this engineered collapse, of not only the farming industry, but America itself. What's taking place is the elites are assuming the power, of everything, all of the resources, all of the rights, and so on and so forth, so that they, in turn, will be able to create the world that they've envisioned, which is them being the gods in the earth. All right, them holding the power to dictate buying and selling. All right, to dictate where you go, when you go, who you go with. All right, to dictate how many people are on the earth. Okay, and what you do. This is all an endeavor to fulfill that ungodly lust that they have, that hellish desire. Spoken about in Habakkuk 2.
At least 25% is now owned by people who don't live in the state, out-of-state funds and investors. A quarter of my state is owned by people who will never go to a Friday night football game in our small town, who aren't shopping on our main streets. Like, this is...
And all of these different foreign investors have been a huge topic these past couple of 4 years. The past 4, maybe 5. 4, maybe 5 years, we've been hearing a lot about these different foreign investors from China, all right, from India, okay, these different foreign countries. But we've also been hearing news as well of these certain elites like Bill Gates, excuse me, and, men of that economical stature that have been buying up farmland as well. Men who are completely, have no ties to the agricultural world at all. Neither the medical world are buying up stakes, patents, and farmland, all right, and just holding it. And they've been holding it for years, and now we see the reason why they've been holding it. But the prophets have been saying this for years, starting with our elders, apostles, great millstone on down. But I asked ChatGPT the question, how much farmland do the elites of America own? And, they're going to fluff it and say there isn't an official category called the elites. So there's no single number, but we're just going to jump down. It says one of the biggest individual farmland owners. A small group of wealthy individuals own large amounts of farmland, but still only a tiny share of the total. Bill Gates, which we already know, the gates of hell, 270,000 acres, largest private farmland owner in the U.S. John Malone, over 2 million acres, mostly ranch land, not all farmland. And Ted Turner, 2 million acres, mostly ranch land. Now they say they own less than 0.3%, but we know, numbers are falsified all the time. Number 2, it says total U.S. farmland. It says the U.S. has about 900 million acres of farmland. Even very wealthy individuals own tiny fractions, which they're trying to fluff it. Number 3, it says corporate and investment ownerships. It says this is where the elite ownership concerns are more relevant. It says pension funds, hedge funds, and agribusiness companies own millions of acres collectively. Examples include BlackRock, Vanguard, large agribusinesses firms like Cargill, all right, which is really ChatGPT circumventing the question, which if he would have just answered the question, he knows what he's trying to have. ChatGPT is just like fucking Esau. Never can directly answer a question. But this answers the question right there, all right? With these different big corporations, who owns them? What families own them? All right, the elite families, okay? The owners of BlackRock, Vanguard, all right, Cargill, all right? There are elite families that own these big corporations, which are usurping the agricultural land within America and usurping that power to themselves, monopolizing the market, which in turn they will use to lay siege on the people and engineer a famine. But, the rest of it is really irrelevant, man. Let's see. Yeah, I also asked how much farmland do foreigners own in America. But I didn't really get too much on that. Yeah, I didn't get too much on that. So we're going to go back.
In line with Blackstone buying single-family homes, the same thing is happening to our agriculture community. The thing that's so difficult for what I'm trying to undertake right now is to get to the farmers, to help them understand that this is happening on purpose. They don't want more family farms. And matter of fact, if you go to the WF, they don't want sovereignty for our country.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's one of the ways you can strip away sovereignty is to have them have an insecure food base in the state. If you can't feed yourself, how are you sovereign? And it's gotten, Sean, it's gotten very bad to this point. I'll be in these debates with people about the use of agrochemicals and things like that. And when I'm in them, they keep talking about this idea that, well, we need this to produce food. We need glyphosate, for instance, to produce food. And what they're not discussing is that in my state of Iowa, 0.03% of our acres are used to produce anything that will end up on your plate in its original form.
Could you say that again? How much?
0.03% of our acres. Out of 24 million acres, it's roughly 9,000 acres in Iowa, is used to produce any produce, food, that will end up on your plate in its original form. So it's primarily...
Holy shit. It's all chemicals.
It's like... So,
it's all chemicals. And this chemical warfare has been taking place since the goddamn 60s, man. Even earlier than that, maybe. This chemical warfare has been waged for years, and it's starting to intensify. But I wanted to get this because what's happening is a double whammy, Esau going through a double whammy because alongside their own elites engineering the famine, usurping the agricultural land and so on and so forth, all right, the Lord is also sending, storms, tempests, bad weather that has been destroying the crops as well, making it even harder for the farmers to get a leg up. All right, so not only are they facing scrutiny, or they're facing trouble from these big corporations, but they're also facing big trouble from the storms that the Lord is sending as well. Which I asked, weather conditions that cause farmers to lose crops in America in 2026. And on the AIA overview, it says early 2026 weather extremes include severe Florida freezes, record-breaking western heat, and widespread drought have severely impacted U.S. agriculture, causing significant crop losses, particularly in citrus, berries, and grains. Over 75% of the U.S. faces drought conditions, with weather storm losses in Florida alone exceeding $3.1 billion, disrupting supplies, which, let's get into 2 Esdras 15. All right. 2 Esdras 15 and verse 13. It says, I'm going to start at verse 12. Egypt shall mourn, and the foundation of it shall be smitten with the plague and punishment that the Heavenly Father shall bring upon it. They that till the ground shall mourn, for their seed shall fail through the blasting and hail, and with the fearful constellation. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein. All right, and I want to get that in the CEB. This is 2 Esdras 15 and verse 13 in the CEB. It says, let the farmers who work the ground howl, because they won't have enough seed and their trees will be devastated by blight, hail, and terrible storms. How terrible will it be for the world and those that live in it? The sword and distress draw near, and nation will rise against nation to fight with spears in their hands. Human beings won't be able to trust each other as they grow strong against each other, and they will pay no respect to the king or to the powerful chief of their great men. All right? Excuse me. You know, and right now the farmers are howling, man. All right, they've been howling for years. All right. One, because of the blasting in hell, you know, because of the weather, you know, that the Lord has been sending to destroy the crops. But now also because of these big corporations trying to take away their heritage, like the guy said, you know, their livelihoods, you know, and to usurp that power that comes with agriculture. Because like he said, when you have an uncertainty as far as where your food is coming from, you know, whoever has that food really holds the power, man. It really holds the power, which Esau has no power over us, because we understand the Lord has power over all things, man. You know, and the Lord has once fed our forefather by a raven. So we understand that the Lord is powerful above any circumstance that is currently taking place or getting ready to take place on the earth. So we don't fear these things. We understand these things, man. And we understand that famine, you know, is just another avenue to the mark of the beast. All right, all roads lead to the MOTB. And there won't be a new generation of farmers. This is the last generation of farmers concerning America, Babylon the Great. And their livelihood, you know, their heritage is going out with a bang. It's going out with a bang. And from their own people, you know. But with that being said, you know, I'm going to close it out. Lord, and satisfy unto you elect. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rukakwadash. And double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. Shalom. Stay up.